hello. Thanks for finding this session since it wasn't published today. This is, I think it's actually called something different in the recently published thing, something about extending the sandbox. But believe it or not, it was even hard for me to get the name of my session that I was talking about. But anyway, welcome and thanks for finding it. My name's Joe Stegman. I basically run the program management team for Silverlight. And I'm going to be talking today about some of the improvements we've done to our out-of-browser model. And that includes both the Sandbox stuff we've done as well as a set of things we've done that are part of the new trusted model. Now, how many people are familiar, if I can see, how many people are familiar with the Silverlight 3 out-of-browser model? OK, looks like, I think that's, how many people aren't? How about that? See, OK, there's a small set of them. And how many people saw Karen's talk today? How many people didn't see Karen's talk today? OK. All right, so I'll quickly brush through kind of how we got where we are today with the Silverlight 3 out-of-browser model. That'll take just a couple minutes, and then I'll spend the rest of my time showing you all the new Silverlight 4 features that we've got related to out-of-browser, sandboxed, and trusted apps as well. So why did we even go to Silverlight 3 out-of-browser? Why do we even do that? That's a rhetorical question. You don't need to shout back the answer. The answer is really customers asked for it. They said, hey, we're building these really rich, immersive apps. They may be media playback apps. They may be line of business apps. And for media playback apps, they're going, hey, great app. My customers download long video files. They want to be able to play them back when they're on the airplane or something like that. And customers are building LOB apps. They're saying, we want our customers to be able to take these things home when they're not connected to CorpNet, enter some data. When they come back and connect to CorpNet, be able to sync the data back up. And so in order to solve that problem, we had to create this concept of an out-of-browser app. And the reason why is that the browser itself, which is what Silverlight used to live in all the time, is inherently connected, or for the most part inherently connected. Now, there are browsers with disconnected models, but inherently it's a connected thing. So what we needed to do in order to allow people to take their Silverlight apps and actually run them when they're disconnected or offline is we need a way to take those apps and actually take them outside of the browser. And that's what Silverlight 3 was all about. We basically provided an option where a developer could say, hey, make my app available for out-of-browser use. And then the end user themselves would either click on a button or right-click on the Silverlight app, say take out a browser. And what the Silverlight runtime would do would take that whole app, copy it to effectively to some location on your hard drive, create a shortcut to on the desktop or in the start menu. And now the user could then be able to actually run that app while offline. That app itself was still sandboxed. What I mean is that even though it was running off the desktop, it was still safe. That app couldn't do anything malicious to your system. And that was sort of a key tenet of our out-of-browser apps in Silverlight 3. We had to add a few features to support that, which included we had to add an updating model. When you're connected, running in the browser, you have the great browser updating model. So we needed to sort of add some APIs and do some stuff to support that kind of a model when you're running outside the browser. We had to add a set of APIs around detecting whether or not you're connected and whether or not you're online or offline so that you could appropriately sync data. And really the only feature-ish kind of thing we did or only difference we did was we increased isolated storage to 25 megabytes. But effectively, that's where we were in Silverlight 3. In Silverlight 4, things changed a bit. So the Silverlight 3 out-of-browser app worked pretty much the same as the in-browser app, with one key exception. When you're in browser, you have a browser there. You can display your HTML content. When you're out of browser, we didn't have that option. So people who wanted to display ads on their out-of-browser app, they didn't have a way to do that. People who just had simple HTML content, they didn't have a way to present that when running outside the browser. So what we did is we added a web browser control. And that thing runs when you're outside the browser. And I'll give you plenty of demos and talk about how that works. But that's really the key feature that we needed to add in order to round out the feature set from what you can do in browser and out of browser. But we didn't stop there. We added some window settings, toast notification, a couple other things that I will demo, so I won't spend time on here. So taking a little bit of a deeper dive into the web browser control. There's really sort of two parts of this. It's a browser control and an HTML brush. Now, the browser control it might have been a little misleading this morning, but it's only supported outside the browser. If you're running inside the browser, just use the browser. If you're running outside the browser, we had no solution today, so that's why we have we created the browser control, and that's where it works. Effectively, it supports being able to navigate to, by default, site of domain URLs, so you can have your own web content alongside with your Silverlight app, and you can display that web content. If it turns out you want to display, for example, Bing.com, you need to host it in a web page from your site on an iframe, and I'll actually show you a demo of this. Now, the most interesting part of this, and what I'm going to spend a little bit of time in on the demo, is that our web browser control is what I'll say on both OS X and Windows is a windowed control. And what I mean by windowed is that we're actually on Windows, we're basically using the web browser control that ships with Windows, and on OS X we're using WebKit that ships with OS X. And neither of those things were designed to be easily, what I'll say is, composited in with other content, if you will. So it wasn't necessarily designed to play nice within Silverlight. And as such, it's created some limitations. And I wouldn't be doing the session justice if I didn't actually go into those limitations. And I will show you some of those limitations and demos in the next slide, as well as in my demos. The way you get around those limitations is we have this concept called an HTML brush, and I will demo that as well, so I won't spend time on it here. But the key limitations you'll run across is that the web browser control doesn't support opacity, so you can't actually make it opaque and have Silverlight, or you can't make it somewhat transparent and see your Silverlight content behind it. You can't actually rotate it. You can't do effects, and that effects are like blur or drop shadow on it. So far it sounds like a bummer. You can't overlay Silverlight content on top of it. Another one that can sometimes be problematic. However, the reason we have the HTML brush is because it allows you to actually overcome those limitations. And the last piece I said is that the iframe is what you need to use for cross-domain content, but enough chattering. Let's go ahead and let me just show you how you use this thing and how you overcome some of those limitations I talked about. So I'm going to start actually with a, let's see, Control-Shift-In. I'm going to create a new, whoops. Since I got it up, we'll just do it. I'm going to create a new project from scratch just so you can sort of see the guts of how the web browser control works. We'll call it Hello Web Browser. So for folks playing along in the audience, sometimes I type poorly. So if you see me type poorly, it's okay to point it out. Otherwise, I'll waste 5 minutes trying to figure out why I typed poorly. So I'm creating a brand new project here in Silverlight, and since this is about a web browser control, let's go ahead and I could just drop it in, but just to keep things really clear what I'm doing, I'm going to add a web browser control. It's just called web browser. I'm just adding it into my normal Silverlight content like anything else, and I'm going to give it a name, call it web browser, and great, awesome. All done. Can you see what it says there? Maybe not. Let me go ahead and run it. So the first thing you're going to see is I just had a default Silverlight app. I put a web browser control on there. I didn't actually set the source. I'm going to go ahead and run it, and you're going to see fail because we can't display HTML content. You can't use the web browser control when you're running within the browser. So there it is. It says HTML is disabled. So if you see this message, it's because you're actually trying to run the app in browser, and it has web browser content in it. So you need to actually set it up to run outside the browser, and I'm going to do that next. But I do want to, as part of this, I have a set of web browser content here that I'm just going to drag over into my web project here that I want to display. So the first thing I need to do, since some people are not familiar with how out-of-browser apps work in Silverlight, is I'm going to go over to Properties on my project, and I'm going to, it's really hard to make these things work out of browser. I'm going to click the Enable Running Application Out of Browser. That's it. Now let's try, well, let's not just try running it again. Let's go ahead and give it some source. And the first source I want to give it is I'm going to do add.htm. And, whoops, sorry, thank you. I'll show you this web page. See, you guys are paying attention. I love that. Thank you. So this basically just shows a flash ad, and effectively Scott showing something similar to this morning, and he showed the Rickroll thing. There we go. This is something equivalent, so I'm going to run it. It's going to actually run the web browser project first, because I need to install the app. And so we'll wait for that to come up. And I'll go ahead and install it. Come on. So right-click, install the app from the desktop, yes. And it's going to go ahead and run my app. Now, it's slow. There we go. So there you have very simple ad displaying local HTML content. But to really make it kind of clear what's going on here, let me just go ahead and set a margin 40, just so you can kind of see the different elements coming into play here. One other thing I want to do is that one thing that I've been asked about already is that when I'm building an out-of-browser app, do I have to uninstall the app and then reinstall the app every time I make a change? The answer is yes. No, I'm just joking. That's ridiculous. This would need to be 2 hours to get anything done. So all you need to do to enable that, because it's not inherently obvious, is go over to your debug settings and do a couple things. One, this is actually detailed in my slides. Click on the Install Out-of-Browser for debug, install out-of-browser application, and then set your out-of-browser app as the startup project, and away you go. Now I just hit Control F5, and now I'm actually debugging and running my out-of-browser app. So what I wanted to show here is I have HTML, or this is Silverlight here. Inside Silverlight I have a browser control, which is this is HTML, and I have a Flash ad in that HTML page, and the Flash app doesn't take all of it up. So we got Flash, HTML, Silverlight, all playing together, all nice, like peanut butter and chocolate and peanut butter, or whatever it may be. So pretty powerful, the number of things that you can sort of mix together in that model. So returning to the main sample, one thing I do want to show is that really we can display anything that Silverlight can display anything that you can normally display within the browser. So that means browser plugins, but it also just happens to mean if I have a existing PDF content that I want to display, I can use the web browser control to display that existing PDF content the same as I would. Oh, you're going to do that. It's actually looking for an update. Let's see if I can get around it here. Trust me, it does work. I just noticed this earlier today when I ran it. Let's see if we can get around it. If not, oh, there we go. So here, this is just a PDF file that is actually, I'm displaying against Silverlight. PDF right here, all running within a Silverlight app. So it really gives you a powerful mechanism by which you can display other content other than Silverlight content in your out-of-browser application. So I have another web page here. I'm going to get rid of the margin. One thing I want to show is that Silverlight and the web page itself can actually interact with each other. So they can, you can actually have communication between your web page and Silverlight. And I'm going to display this web page, bing.htm. Now, Bing, clearly my app isn't hosted on Bing, so how am I doing that? It's the iframe trick I told you about before. I have my page, and my page just effectively has an iframe in it, and the iframe goes to bing.com. And a couple things I want to show in this demo, which is one, as I told you, that there are some limitations, but there are also a lot of things that Silverlight does nicely with the web browser control. Although you can't rotate it, you can still do simple things like you can scale it. So let me just show you a scale. But man, let's really emphasize that this thing really does actually play pretty nicely within the Silverlight tree. So I'm going to display bing.com here. And ooh, can you guys in the back read that? OK. So let's search for PDC. Ooh, let's just see what's going on in PDC. Oh, sweet. I hope there's a video playing. Is there? Oh, yeah, Silverlight running in the browser control in Silverlight. So, I mean, you're not going to see a demo like that anywhere else, really. You don't want to see a demo like that anywhere else, but and there's it'll actually really play, believe it or not. So it's pretty powerful stuff that the snake swallowing its own tail. So let's get rid of that because that's just a gratuitous demo. Done for no other reason than applause. Let's show you something actually practical. So I'm going to get rid of the browser control and just drag in a little bit more. And this is still, I got the web browser control in here, but I added some UI. And let me just bump this up so you can see the UI that I just added up above. Just a simple text box and a search button. And the search button right down here, the text box right here is called search string. So what I want to do is I want to be able to type a search query. This is all in Silverlight. Type a search string in there, hit the search button, have that go down into the web page, and call a method, which is in my web page, called doSearch. So I want Silverlight to actually tunnel through, call into a JavaScript function on my web page that passing a value that does a search on Bing. So this is pretty hard to wire up. So bear with me a minute, because what I need to do is wire up that button and add click equal, add a new event handler on my button. Let's go ahead and navigate to the event handler. And I won't bore you with my typing, although this one is easy enough that I could just type in here with probably not getting it wrong. So the web browser I named WB. There's my web browser control. So it's got a method on it called invoke script. And all it does is it says, hey, for my hosting web page, go look for a JavaScript function called doSearch. And if so, you can pass it 0 or more arguments. In this case, I'm passing it 1 argument, which happens to be the search string that I type into that text box. So really simple one line of code. So let's go in here and type PDC, hit search, and that called down through my web page. So it's Silverlight now talking to JavaScript. So you can create these nice apps where actually get Silverlight working seamlessly with HTML. So let's not stop there, though. Let's go the other way quickly, and I'm going to add a button in, nope, not that, the button. This is an HTML button, and what this does is, you can see this is a button in HTML, and if I click on it, it's going to call a method window.external.notify. And what Silverlight does when it's hosting the browser control or WebKit on OS X is it injects into the JavaScript DOM a method called window.external.notify that takes 1 argument, and the argument is a string. And in JavaScript now, you can call this method that we inject, and when you do that, it'll turn around and fire an event on the browser control, on the hosting browser control. So let's hook that up. I'm going to, again, just spare you the agony of my typing. And what happens is that the web browser control has an event on it called script notify, and when that's called, it has an event args, and one of the values to the event args is actually the value passed in by the hosting HTML page. So let's run this and notify Silverlight. So this is the browser shoving back up into Silverlight, and here's Silverlight talking back through to the web browser control. So you see we have a nice interop between Silverlight and the browser control that goes both ways. So again, it's like peanut butter and chocolate and peanut butter and chocolate. So anyway, quick little demo of some of the features of HTML. But I'm not done. So let's get to some of the interesting aspects of the browser control. So what I have here is I have in Emerald Lagasse fashion, I have something already cooking that we'll take a look at here. And this is a pretty simple app. How many people were at Mix this year? Or anybody watched any of the Mix sessions online? We've been doing some research in the Silverlight team for quite a while that I showed off there, which is we were wondering what the backside of pixels looked like. So we built this little app to show what the backside of pixels look like. And this is an image, but you could also see what the backside of video pixels look like. It turns out they look the same as the front side, only in reverse, which we were disappointed when we discovered that. So it's natural. We said, hey, what does the backside of HTML pixels look like? And so it did beg the question. So let's go ahead and try and see what that is. And don't be alarmed. I got a caching issue. We'll run it again. All will be fine. or will it? So there's my web browser control. I'm going to go ahead and, can you believe that? Look at that. I stole my own thunder. So you're actually not seeing the web browser control. It's true. You're not. It's my final version of the sample, but don't worry. We'll fix it real quick. You didn't see that. This is not the demo you're looking for. We're done. It's all good. This is the demo you're looking for. That just shows you that you can overcome the pain. So I'll go back to the web browser control. I want to demonstrate. This is what I was looking for. That's really the web browser control in there. And what's happening is that you can see the web browser control is actually sitting on top of that pop-up there. And if I try to move it, or if I try to see what the backside of these pixels look like, you can see it does not want to play nice in that world. And we get the same behavior on both Windows and on OS X. And that's where HTML Brush comes in. And the solution you just saw actually was an HTML Brush-based solution. And so I'm going to go ahead and shove that in here to show you how you can actually work around that limitation. And what I'm going to do is drag over this rectangle plus brush. And what I've done here is that, oh, by the way, my app is pretty basic. It has an image, a media element, and a web browser control. And when I select the combo box, if I select image, it shows the image and hides the other two. Same with media element, and same with web browser. So what I'm now doing is I added yet another element called a rectangle. And let's hide this. I added another, oh, can you believe that? Boy, oh boy. No worries. It'll all come back. Yes, I know what that issue is. So it's related to showing my web browser control at design time. I went off script. It's my bad. We'll get back there. Just keeping it interesting, showing you it's real. So let's go back here. We'll go ahead and add this HTML plus brush. No, don't do that. Rectangle plus brush. So what I added here was a rectangle, the exact same size as my web browser control. Hopefully that wasn't causing my pain there. The exact same size as the web browser control. And inside of it, I'm painting that rectangle with an HTML brush. And the HTML brush has one property called source name on it. And the source name basically says, hey, where do you want to get your content from? And in this case, I'm saying, hey, I want you to be this brush to actually use as its source that web browser control. So this brush will go to the web browser control, say, hey, give me your current view, if you will, and let me use that to paint. Now, all seems wonderful. Now, the one thing I do need to change in my code here is I was showing and hiding the web browser control before. Now I actually want to show and hide that rectangle. And let's go ahead and run it again. And all will be wonderful, really. Or will it? So why is it black? It seems to be doing what I want it to do, but why is it black? And the reason is that unlike our other brushes, the HTML brush itself doesn't update on its own. You have to basically tell it when to update. And the reason why is that we had certain scenarios where customers didn't necessarily want the brush to be updating all the time. So we wanted to provide a finer level of support than so they could do whether a snapshot update or update on their own. So what I've got is I've got a little bit of code here that all it does is updates the brush every 100 milliseconds. That's all you're seeing here, and the way it updates it is just says redraw. Every 100 milliseconds, it just calls redraw on that. And now you're going to see the behavior pretty much that we want. There's HTML sliding along, and yes, if you want to see what the backside of those pixels look like, not shocking there. They look the same. But now, there's more. Thank you. So I have to tell you, there's one problem with using the brush. See, why isn't it replaying? Because the brush is non-interactive. So there's good with the bad. So what I really want is I want an experience where when I'm kind of over and interacting with that thing, that I can use the web browser control, and when I'm not, I see the brush. And I've actually wired up that code for you. And I won't go into detail other than say it's pretty easy to do. I'll make my source, first of all, available, and you'll see how I do it. But all you have to really do is play with mouse inner events, and with that you can get the kind of experience that you want. And so I've already got the inner event wired up, but let me just show you this now. So if you notice now I got a hand when I'm over here. Now watch. Did you notice it change? Did you notice it change? You didn't, but it did change. I can do, see, you wouldn't even know if I hadn't told you that I'm actually swapping between the two. So it's interactive when I'm over it, but I still get all this fancy schmancy stuff. And if I hit replay, sure enough, it's interactive. So it's really actually easy to make the two work and play together seamlessly. Okay, enough time on HTML. Let's move on to something else. I got lots to cover. I actually covered these things about setting up and running and debugging your app. So jumping on to a couple other things. For out-of-browser apps, one of the things we got to ask about a lot was, hey, how do I set the height and width? Yeah, it seemed obvious that you'd want to be able to do that, but we actually didn't have it in Silverlight 3, so we added it in Silverlight 4. The ability to set startup location, you can do that now. You can only do that today, you can only set startup location or location at all in the bits that you've got. You can do that sort of in Visual Studio settings, which I'll show in my next demo, but, or in, I think a trusted app demo. But in the final version of Silverlight, you'll be able to dynamically change the location of the app at runtime too. Today, the only thing we support, again, in the beta is just changing the height and width. You can now do runtime control over the window state, normal, minimized, maximized. You can actually set your Silverlight app to be topmost, which means it stays on top of all other content, and that's good if you're building a toolbar type scenario. And we have an activate method that we added, and what activate does is that effectively if your window is in normal state and it's in the back Z order and it can't be seen, if you call activate, it pops it to the front. And if your app happens to be minimized, when you call activate, it'll actually flash the task bar. So the other thing we added was the concept of notifications, and think of email or IM or Twitter scenarios where you're doing something, you may have had, your customer or user may have minimized your app, and something happened, like somebody tweeted or somebody sent you an email, and you want to pop up and go, hey, something happened. That's what this is to address, and it's the couple of the limitations with this feature is that it is limited to 400 by 100 in size. I'm actually going to demo it next, so you'll see how it works. And you can only pop these things up, these notifications up for 30 seconds, and those are really more for security reasons. There are other more engineering reasons that we couldn't do some other things like set opacity or rounded corners on it. But that, in general, for the core scenarios we were going for, that turns out that it's not an issue. The location where it pops up is fixed. It's lower right-hand corner on Windows, which is where you expect them to be, and I believe it's upper right on OS X, or upper left. It's below the taskbar at the top. So with that, let's go ahead and show you a demo. And I've got, in Julia Child fashion again, I've got something sort of pre-canned that does this, just so I don't have to walk through all the laborious details here. And go ahead and run this app. And it's got some of this coded up, just so you can kind of see how it works. So this is completely developed using Silverlight. It's just a simple little media app. And if I play something there, and let's F5 it, there's a caching issue for the HTML content. So in this case here, you see my ad slide in, and then it becomes interactive. This is actually using the feature that I just showed you, where I actually do, in this case, this media player app. I want to be able to slide an ad in and then make it interactive. But the key thing I want to show here is that, and I think Scott showed it in his keynote, you can build simple experiences like this where you can have an app minimized or maximized. And Toast, you can pop up Toast. That's what it looks like naked. And I'll show you how to fill it in. But if you just pop up the notification window, I've got this button that pops it up. And I'll show you now. Hey, this is just, there we go. Good. Demo gods are cooperating again. So first of all, let's look at really simple. How do I do the minimize? When I click that minimize button, there's some code that runs. That's the minimize click, and really no surprise, a shocker here. The application itself has a main window. You get access to it by doing application.current.main window, and if I look at it, that has the properties that I talked about before. Activate is the method that allows you to activate it. It has a height and width property, and those things can be set at runtime. It has a left and a top property that controls. Right now, they just tell you where it is, but by the time we ship, you'll actually be able to use that to change the location of the app at runtime. And it's got a window state, which is like minimized, maximized, and you can change that at runtime. So no shocker here that all I'm doing is I'm calling a methods on the main window of this and telling it to change the size either to a small size or large size. So the other one I want to show, though, is toast. And same thing, when I click on that button, that calls this toast click method, which calls show toast. And the naked version is we have a new class in Silverlight called the notification window. That's new in Silverlight 4. This works only out of browser. And what happens is when you call that notification window, this is actually, this whole code here is responsible for making that happen. That's the total amount of code it takes. Create a new notification window, and you don't have to parent it because we're automatically creating that notification window in the lower corner, and this says to show it for 5 seconds. So I can actually put arbitrary content in here. And I have a existing, typically what you want to do is you want to create a user control. And I did create a user control that is basically just gives me details on the currently playing artist. And it's this thing right here. And so all I want to do is just new up one of those and shove it in there. And that's what I'll do here. So that's user control I just showed you. It's called now playing. It's actually data bound, so I actually data bind it to the currently playing artist. This is the notification window is called NW. It's got a property on it called content, and whatever you want to be in the notification window, you set the content property to that. So in this case, I want my user control to display, so I'm telling my notification window its content is that user control. I can set the width on this thing, and the other thing I'm doing is I'm hooking an event handler on it so that if I click on that notification window, I can either activate the window, but I think actually in this case I'll set the window state to window state.normal and show you this experience. So really I've only done a couple things in here. I'm going to click on the show toast button, and now I should be able to see so if I have somebody playing here, I should be able to show toast, and now it shows me that toast, but I've actually wired this up so that as you switch artists, or you switch from one song to the other, it will also do this. So you're in the back, you're listening to your music, you got it playing. Oh, pops up, you go, I don't like the Beatles. So you want to pop it up, clicked on it, pops it up, and you switch to the next song in this case. But again, the interaction here, just to show you again real quickly, is that I coded it up so that the click handler controls the window state. So if that pops up, pops up, pops up. Oh, there it is. So it would actually pop this to the front. I won't do another one on you, but effectively you get the idea. You can actually hook events on that thing so that you can pop up your main window if it's doing something. So that's a quick scan through some of the new windowing features we did. Scott mentioned this, and I think Karen mentioned that we did offline DRM playback. I won't go into the details other than to say that it is supported. The reason I talk about it here is because it is supported in, or the new out-of-browser model is actually what enables this. And effectively, the key thing here that was really a huge engineering effort is that in Silverlight 3, in order to play DRM content, it needed to have a live connection to go back and say, hey, I need to get a license. And what we did in Silverlight 4 is we allowed you to acquire a license and then store it locally, all transparent to the user or end user. And we have a persistent, local, secure license store that does that. And I'm actually not going to demo this. There's a media talk tomorrow, I believe, that will do that. But just wanted to call it out. I want to get to the meat of probably one of the biggest features that we added in, probably the biggest one or the most interesting in Silverlight 4 was this concept of a trusted app. And what do I mean, actually? Why do we call it a trusted app? And why do we actually even do it? And in Silverlight 3, you could build these nice sandboxed out-of-browser apps. But one thing we heard a lot was, hey, it's great. And what we heard a lot was but. It's great, but I want to do this, but I want to do that. And you start looking at all the buts, and you're like, holy crap, how are we going to do all those in a nice, safe, secure way? And it just became, it was impossible. Some of them were just, hey, I'd love to do Silverlight connecting over port 80 with no restrictions whatsoever. Great, we'd love to enable that, but it's a security problem. How do you enable that for customers who, and there are customers with legitimate reasons. I think there's somebody in here in row 2, I know, who's asked me for that specifically. So it is real scenarios, and but we can't enable those always in a safe, secure way. So instead, what we did is we said, okay, we'll go ahead and enable some of these things, but we'll enable them under the context of a trusted app. And what trusted app means is that before if you're running a Silverlight app in browser or you're running it out of browser, you don't have to trust that app. You as an end user don't need to trust that thing. You could go to evil.com. There's a Silverlight app on evil.com. You could run it out of browser. You could run it in browser, and it can't foobar your system because we do work to make sure that it can't. And the difference between the trusted apps is that now we're exposing APIs that can actually get access to trusted information or information you may not want to share with any old app in the world. So how do we handle that? And the way we handle that is we expose some new APIs, and we only actually allow the APIs to actually be used, if you will, if the app is installed as a trusted app. And what that means is the install experience for this app, if it is set up to be a trusted app, is a scarier install experience. It says to the user, rather than, hey, where do you, in the case of normal out of browser, it just says, hey, where do you want to create your shortcuts? Instead, in trusted apps, it says, hey, do you trust this app? Because you better trust this app, because if you don't install it. So that's what we mean by trusted apps. But if you're writing a trusted app, you can do a lot more powerful stuff. And this is where the device access comes in, the file system access comes in, those sorts of things. So we did really 2 main areas. For trusted apps, we relaxed some Sandbox speed bumps. This is policy file for cross-domain networking, that sort of a thing. We added file system access. And by the way, the first 2 things that we did, the file system access, the policy file restrictions, or the Sandbox restrictions, all work the same, consistent, cross-platform. They work the same way on Windows. You get all the same functionality on Windows and OS X. Well, we only did one thing at all, or one thing that was what we call native integration, that it actually allows you to get access to the underlying system. And that's this native integration feature, which I'll talk about in a couple slides. But the relaxed Sandbox speed bumps, Scott talked about them this morning, but effectively we just removed policy files, removed user initiation requirements, that sort of thing. If you trust the app, then you don't need these additional restrictions in place for the most part. So with that, let's go ahead and do a quick little demo here of a trusted app and show you how you'd build one of these. So let's see if we can get Control-Shift-N to work for us this time. There we go. And I'll call it Hello Trusted App. Yes. And I think Scott kind of covered it in his keynote that in order to build a trusted app, you have to click on one additional item. And so let's shrink this up a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and just drag over some content here before I set this up, before I actually set it up to install as a trusted app. All I did is I added a button and a list box, and the button says Do Search. And we're going to go ahead and wire up that Do Search button now. And go to the event handler. So Do Search. What do I want to search for? Well, first of all, just to make my demo go a little cleaner, I'm going to pull over a try-catch. Never a good sign when you want to pull that over as part of your demo, but I'll explain why. So what I want to search is I want to search the hard drive because that sounds like fun. I'm running a Silverlight app. Shouldn't be able to do that, but let's just see what we can do here. String path equals environment, whoops, env, boy, envi. There we go. Jeez. And a new method, get folder path. Yes, what? Let's do my music. My music, that sounds good. Awesome. So I'm going to try to get the full path, like in my case, C:/users, blah, 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 to my music. That doesn't sound like something I want any app to be able to do, but heck, I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to do IEnumerable of string. What else am I going to do? Well, let's do files equals directory. And it's there. Come on. There we go. Using system.io dot enumerate files. Oops, that looks like fun. Enumerate files. What files? Let's enumerate files in the path, which is my music. That sounds like fun. Well, if it's my music, how about MP3 files? Whoops. Star.mp3. And search options, yeah, let's get them all subdirectories. Let's see what this person's rocking to. And let's go ahead and for each them. So now I'm going to iterate over all the files. So just to be clear what happened here. Files, I got it. Thank you. So I grabbed a path, which is actually, if I were to message box this, you'll see path is actually a full path on my hard drive to the My Music folder. And then I'm actually going through and calling and enumerating over, I'm doing a search over every single directory and subdirectory in there, and I'm looking for every MP3 file. And when I find them, I'm going to shove them into this list I added in my main XAML. That sounds like a lot of, well, something that normally I don't want an app to do. So let's go ahead and try it, and let's just see how this works. So run the app. Going to be running in browser by default. And we come here. Let's get MP3 files. Oh, as you would expect, you can't do that. Security exception. You can only do these, use these elevated trust APIs, if you will, when you're actually running out of browser in an elevated trust app. So how do you set that up? So let's come over here, click on project properties. I'm going to enable running it out of the browser, and I'm going to go into my settings, and I'm going to say require elevated trust when running outside the browser. But while I'm here, I can't get away with just showing one feature. Show that I can now set the height and width at startup, and I can even set the location at startup. So I'm saying, hey, make it 600 by 600 and put it in the top left-hand corner. So let's run this thing again and see what kind of experience that I get. So bring up the in-browser app to install the out-of-browser app. There we go. Right-click. Hello. This is the scary menu, still working on the UX, but this is the, hey, do you trust this app? Not the simple, basic, hey, where do you want to put it? It's, hey, this can access personal data or harm your computer. Do you trust it? I know the author in this case. I think he's an okay, credible guy. I'm going to say yes. So get MP3 files, and bam, that actually really did. This is not canned demo. Really did. Go ahead, do a search. And there you can see the full path of my music on my system. So pretty simple, pretty basic, but it does require elevated permission. So one additional thing I want to show in the demo, though, which is, go, OK, I can do this elevated thing, and I can sort of light up with elevated, if I'm running an elevated trust app, there are other things I can do. But what if I want to build an app that sort of can either run, same binary that can either run elevated or run non-elevated. And I can provide an option where the user can either run in browser or run an elevated version. And I just dragged over some code, and we have some APIs such as has elevated permissions. So you can basically say, you can query to see if your app is running in elevated permissions mode. So this is your app itself. And you can say, hey, if they're running in elevated permissions, in this case, if they're not, if they're running in browser, then I don't want to show that search button. And I want to let the user know that, hey, you can't do that. So let's run it again. Now get this. Exact same binary that I can run in browser, or I could run elevated trust outside of the browser. So when I'm running in browser, I'm checking to see if I'm running with elevated permissions. I'm not. I'm running in browser. So I say gray that out and say, hey, this thing has to be installed. So you can create this really seamless experience, one binary that can do different things based on whether or not it's running elevated trust or not elevated trust. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump back to the demo and talk about the last little thing that I want to touch on here, which is called native integration. So native integration is the one feature that we added in Silverlight 4 that works, that's platform specific. So everything we do in Silverlight, we work like crazy to try to make sure all our features work consistently cross-platform. And yes, sometimes there are some platform oddities that make that really hard or that even occasionally bleed up. But we work like crazy to try to make a consistent experience between the OS X experience and the Windows experience. So based on really the customer demand for being able to do things like interop with Office and being able to talk to local components, we added 2 APIs. And it's the COM Automation Factory.createObject and getObject. These are the only 2 APIs effectively that exist in Silverlight that are saying, let me tunnel through to platform-specific stuff. So if you're calling those APIs, you should, and we have APIs that tell you whether or not these are going to work on the platform. If you're doing that, I guarantee you're doing something, at least now in Silverlight, that is Windows-specific. Now, I can tell you that you're not going to just use these APIs without actually knowing you're doing something Windows or COM-specific, and that's as I get into the details. You'll see what's actually required to take advantage of these APIs. So anyway, the 2 APIs are createObject and getObject, and what they do is they take how many people are old VB programmers by chance? There's only a few, or ASP, or VBA, or VB script. So anybody, and I'm actually not going to go into a lot of details on COM or what iDispatch is, but effectively, how about old JavaScript programmers? People familiar, old JavaScript programmers? Where old days of JavaScript programming, before IntelliSense and JavaScript, you kind of went window, dot, and you got no help, and you go, what the heck do I do now? And you had to look in the docs, and you tried something, and maybe it worked, or maybe it didn't, and you didn't have the parens right. That's what this world is, believe it or not. So if you're using this, that's kind of the programming model, which is using the dynamic keyword in C# 4.0 if you're using C#, or it just is the built-in Visual Basic dynamic feature that they have there. That's how you code against one of these things that's returned from either createObject or getObject. And it is an old-school JavaScript type programming model. So all we do is we allow you to tunnel through and basically instantiate, if you will, existing components that already live on your system. So you can't install your own components. You can only tunnel through and gain access to ones that already live on the system. I have a couple slides here that actually talk about some of the details. I'm going to leave these here for people to peruse later who are actually interested in the details of how this works. The only thing I really want to call out is that effectively you're calling a method on one of these underlying system services or a property, and it has a standard, what I'll call value type. It returns an int, a float, or double. Those things all get marshaled back into C# or VB land as what you would expect, int, floats, or doubles. If it's anything else that is some kind of weird object on the COM side, that actually gets returned as a dynamic or a dynamic object in VB on the CLR side or the Silverlight side. Again, more information that I'll save for people who want to peruse the slides later. The key thing I want to call out here is that we don't get type information from that underlying service, so that's why you get no IntelliSense today in Visual Studio. You kind of have to look at the docs for the component, and the docs aren't Microsoft docs. They're whoever actually created this component. You have to look at their docs to figure out how to use it. So again, why would you want to do something like this? What does it give you? Well, you can interop with Office, which is what I'm going to show. People have used WMI. WMI gives you a whole range of things that you can do, whether it's checking system information, the demo they showed in the keynote where Brian Goldfarb showed the camera. That whole thing was done using WMI and kind of file watching there. Anybody who's used classic ADO, actually that installs with Windows. You can actually use that. So you could, if you wanted to, you can do line of sight to your database. The sensor GPS information is exposed, speech, but like I say, there's more than can be counted or more than the stars. There's a bazillion things that we give you access to. The one caveat, though, for programming, other than you're going to watch how I have to do it, and it is a bit cumbersome at times, is that most of the documentation for these things, it's not Silverlight documentation, is the examples are VB script. And for people who are C# programmers, just remember that in VB, this sometimes means this. So this sometimes means this. Sometimes it doesn't. It's confusing. It's really confusing, but sometimes it means it's an array and sometimes it doesn't. So let's go ahead and just quickly show you how I would interact with one of these COM components. And I'm going to go ahead and do my Emerald Lagasse again and pull over my pre-baked sample, Control F5 it real quick, and just kind of show you what I've got here. I've got this little thing here that says export to Excel. So what I'd like to do is take my whole playlist and export it to Excel. How difficult is that to do? Well, it turns out it's actually not super difficult if you're familiar with the automation APIs of Excel, which most people in here are probably not. So let's go ahead and drag over some code here that does the basic. And not only did I drag that over, I dragged over some documentation, and you'll see why this is important. So what I'm doing here is I'm calling one of those two APIs I told you about, create object. It creates this thing called Excel.application. And for people who, some people might be going, what the heck is that? That's not a Silverlight thing. Excel.application has nothing to do with Silverlight. We're actually tunneling through into Windows, and we're effectively asking Windows, we're saying, hey, can you create a component for us called Excel.application? And Windows goes through and uses the magic of COM to say, hey, there's something installed on my system called Excel.application. I'm going to spin one of those up and give a handle to Silverlight. But so Silverlight doesn't know anything at all about Excel.application. We're just calling through to the underlying COM plumbing, if you will, and asking for one of these, and it may return it or it may not. So how do I even know one of these exists? Well, maybe. In this case, I happen to know that Excel automates or provides automation interfaces for a lot of their stuff. But there's actually documentation out there on exactly this beast. And this is actually the Excel.application reference. And I use this to figure out all the fun little things that I can do with the Excel application. You can see some things highlighted that I actually had to play with for this demo. But one of the key ones, there's a lot that you can do. But this is the MSDN documentation on Office. This is actually Office documentation on how you want to actually go about and interact with this component. It's got a visible property here that says it returns a bool, and it's a get set. So what I want to do is, yes, using this sort of mechanism, I create one, and then I get under Excel returned, and I've declared it up above, just kind of saved you some of my pain. It's a dynamic. This new C# 4.0, I'm doing this in C#. I have to declare this as a dynamic object, and I'll just go ahead and .excel. Let's see what sort of magic I get here. Whoa. Yes, that's right. I get nothing. This is kind of the pain. How do I figure out how to interact with one of these? This is why I'm saying it's going to be completely clear if you try to use one of these that you've stepped outside the realm of Silverlight and inside the realm of I'm using a system service. Because you get this far and you go, wow. You realize in order to interact with one of these things, you actually have to read the documentation on that thing, Excel.application. So I did read the documentation enough to know it has a visible property, no IntelliSense. I'm just going to say, I assume this is going to, whoops, equals true. I assume this is going to work. Let's go ahead and run this and cross our fingers. And lo and behold, it created a new instance of Excel and made it visible. That's beautiful. So let's see what else we can do. So once you get the idea, once you get rolling with this, it's like old school JavaScript programming. You're like, wow. I can do all kinds of cool stuff. So here, I just build on top of that. Once I got one of these things, using the Excel docs, I create a new workbook. I go get my playlist. I shove my playlist in there. I turn on auto filter. I set the height and width. It's magic. So now let's go ahead and do that. And by the way, these things can fully work in the background. Through the magic of COM, I could actually spin this up on a background thread so you don't have to wait for it. But here it is. With that code I dragged in, now I took my whole playlist and I'm shoving it into Excel. But wait, there's more. It doesn't end there. So kill Excel, kill my app. Whoops, whoa. Sorry, you're awake now. So one thing that I do want to show you is there are two APIs. There's create object, and then there's get object. And the difference between the two is in get object, if I run my app again, get object actually attaches to a running instance. So in this case, if I do export to Excel, it's not going to create a new instance. It's going to say, is there one already? And if so, use that. So in this case, if Excel was already running, I could just pop up another new workbook on it and shove my data into there. So we'll go ahead and kill this while it's exporting. Actually, I have to kill Excel first, and then kill my app. So, but there's more. And the more requires me to actually look in the documentation to just show you some other interesting things you can do. So Excel itself and a lot of the COM automation objects, they actually support events. And in this case, I can I can get an event that tells me anytime I change data. And I can get an event that tells me when I closed Excel, which sound like interesting things if I'm actually not just want to export to Excel, but maybe I want people to do a calculation in Excel and then be able to re-import that data back into my app. So I could use this sheet change event. And I go using Excel documentation. I see a sheet changed event. Let's see, it fires. It takes 2 arguments. Both these arguments look kind of like objects. I'm not really sure. So a lot of times when you're looking at the documentation, you go, it's not an int or a float or a double. Chances are what that means is that it's going to fire an event, and the event's going to take 2. In C# land, that means it's going to take 2 dynamics. So what you need to do in order to hook an event is I need to match this delegate signature, which means I need to create a delegate that I'll call sheet changed that takes a dynamic and a dynamic, which I've already done here. Again, you can look at my sample online, which will make this a little bit clearer, but I already created a delegate that takes 2 dynamics, sheet change and range, and I did the same thing for window deactivate. It turns out when I looked at the Excel documentation, it returned 2 arguments. So I created 2 arguments that are dynamics that correspond to that. And now, how do I hook those events then? I hook them on my Excel object, pretty much how you would expect. I do Excel on sheet change, and I just plus equal new sheet changed event handler using the delegate signature that I just created. And to save you some time, I actually already have the event handlers in here. And what I'm doing here is that I noticed that on sheet change, so if you actually change some data, then I have an import button on the toolbar, and I actually want to say if you're changing data, turn on that import button and make it visible so you can now import that data back. And if you actually close Excel, what I want to do is I want to deactivate that import button. So let me just go ahead and run it, and I'll show you the full loop here. But again, really just to show you kind of the things that you can do here. So let's go ahead and export to Excel. I think I hit it. Oh, I didn't? Did I not run it? Is that what you're saying? Oh, jeez. I'm glad you guys are paying. You're good. You are good. That is exactly the problem. Next week, I'd still be looking for that one. What the heck? It worked on my machine. Let's try it again. OK, so there we go. Now we're exporting everything to Excel. And again, through the magic of COM, I originally actually coded this all up to do it all on a background thread, and it just worked. The thing is that it actually made the demo slightly more difficult to demo. So I said, nah, we'll do it on a foreground thread. So you see here, here's my playlist. Here I got Beatles, Avril Lavigne, right here. Now what I want to do is, you know what? Let's go ahead and let's go down to get rid of the first set of them. Now notice when I change that, did you guys catch the fact that this became active, or do I need to show the demo again? It actually hooked this sheet changed event, and when I did that, this import became active. Now I can import, which I didn't show you the code, but it does the reverse of that export code. Now what this will do is, again, I could have done this on a background thread. We're actually waiting for it. It went and read all that data from Excel, and you see Sublime now. Sublime is the first song that you see here. So I can now have a nice interaction between my Silverlight app, not only now in HTML, which I showed before, but now with these other components like Excel, I can import and export between the two. So this time, actually, watch this button. I'll show you the event actually working here. If I go ahead and exit, no, I don't want to save the changes, you'll see that I actually hooked the event, and when the event was hooked, I saw that the Excel was shutting down, and so I wanted to not show that import button anymore. So extremely powerful. Also, I will caution you, as you can tell, it's also extremely complex and takes a little bit to get your head wrapped around it, but super enabling for people who want to have a deeper integration with Windows. So with that, I think I got a couple things, 2 remaining slides. Still considering for Silverlight 4, custom Chrome. It says considering. You saw it in the keynote. We have it working internally. It exists. It will ship in the final version of Silverlight. We currently, for our file system access, we don't allow temp or desktop access, so we'll likely open those up. We still have, in the beta, we have policy file restrictions on sockets and the UDP multicast listener. We'll remove those before we ship. And the last thing is, we don't support app signing today, and there's a bunch of reasons why we want to support app signing for trusted apps, and so it's quite likely you're going to see that coming before we ship. One last slide. before I get on to Q&A is that Silverlight 4, if for whatever reason you're in the enterprise and you go, I don't like those trusted apps, I don't want them to be installed, we have group policy support that says you can roll out policy file that says don't allow my users to install these trusted apps. And even if you decide worse than that, you say, hey, I don't even want them to activate them. I don't care how they get them on there. I don't want them to run them. You have another option where you can roll out group policy that says, heck, don't allow them to install them. Don't even let them activate those things. So with that, please fill out your evals, pdc.com, and thank you, and I'll take questions.
Question?
Yep.
Over here. On your left. On your left. There
Left.
we go.
There we go.
Is
My
there any
other left.
limitation on the number of HTTP connections you can make with an out-of-browser?
So the question is there a limitation on the number of requests? You know, that's actually good feedback. There is a limitation. We still honor the browser limitation, which is, or whatever, we upped it actually to, I think, 6 in the last version. But that's actually good feedback. It's the first time someone's asked that. No, we actually shouldn't have that restriction.
Thank you.
So there is. Let's say there is, but I'll make a note of it that it may be something we can clean up before we ship the final version.
One more. If I already had installed an out-of-browser trusted mode application, could I use that application to stream down a file, say a COM DLL or maybe a COM-enabled assembly, and write that to the disk and register it?
Yeah. If you're clever enough, it's possible. You know, with COM, you can do anything. You can run C script. You can run anything you want. You copy a script file down there. Sorry, you can. It's just the reality of it. So yes, it's probably possible. So go ahead.
I had a question about on the Mac side. Is there going to be support for native menus in the Mac menu bar?
So the question is there support for native menus? Are you talking about an R right-click menu support?
No, like the top bar in the Mac, like the application menus. What's the experience going to be when you have an app in the foreground on the menu bar?
If you have an app in the foreground on OS X.
Yeah. And so at the top menu bar.
Yeah.
You know, is that going to be customizable? You know, or is it going to be blank? Or how's that going to play with the user's desktop?
That's a good question. If I had my Mac machine, I'd check. So I'll get an answer for you before the next day. So if anybody's got a Mac, you can try it. But I don't know, but I'm sure somebody on my team knows the answer to that question. So I actually normally run with MacBook, but for reasons that, long story, but I ended up swapping here, and so I actually can't do my demos on OS X, which I would normally do. But I can at least get you an answer to your question, even though I can't verify it on my machine.
How does
Where's that coming from?
right here? How does VSTO work with Silverlight?
How does VS?
Yeah, Visual Studio
Tools
Tools for
for-
Office.
So it's well, I'm doing two things. I'm answering your question, but I also wanted to show you that I didn't show you add remove programs. So I'll show you that we add entries in here. You can remove them for what it's worth for those people still sticking around. So VSTO is actually a separate thing from Silverlight. So it actually doesn't interact with VSTO and those APIs at all. You could, and it's conceivable, you could take the majority of those APIs, and we've talked about it internally, and port those to Silverlight and get those actually working on top of Silverlight. For the most part, we just haven't done the work yet. We recently just got this online, so trying to figure out how do we use existing PIAs or VSTO with Silverlight is something that's the next question. But at this point in time, we haven't done any work to actually make it so we can leverage those .NET wrappers in Silverlight. But it's not something that we're in any way, shape, or form not thinking about or for any reason omitted on purpose. It's just lack of time.
So,
Go ahead, I'll go over here to the left. I think there's somebody there.
me?
Yes.
What's the plan for Mac support for elevated privileges to get, say, for example, the same COM support concept on a Mac platform, or is that kind of excluded from the roadmap?
So no, it's not excluded at all from the roadmap. When we added this, we looked at AppleScript support and what it would take to do something like that. So it's something we would look at and we continue to look at. We didn't find one that it's less supported on OS X. It doesn't mean we didn't want to support it, but it was more difficult to plumb into and less powerful. And so it's something we continue to look at, but we are thinking about doing, and I think I took out a slide on what we were thinking about doing on OS X, but we designed the API such that we could tunnel through, whether it's on OS X or on mobile platforms in the future, we could tunnel through and use it as a generic API to tunnel through to get system services back.
Awesome, thanks.
Sure, go ahead.
So with group policies, can we say disable all of them except ours, except the specific ones that we want to allow?
So the question is, can you disable all of them but a specific set? And I will have to check. That was actually in our original design. I would normally say yes, but I want to verify that's the case. But originally that was the goal, was that we wanted to make it so you could either disable all of them or disable all but just a set that were OK to run within the enterprise. And I believe that is the case. But you can feel free to contact me. If you can, jstegman@microsoft.com. You can contact me afterwards. I'll give you my contact info, but I can verify for sure for you. Go ahead.
You had mentioned that you can only access COM objects that are already installed on the machine.
That's right.
Is there a way to package a trusted Silverlight app along with COM components in an MSI or another install and install them?
Yeah, absolutely. We have customers that do exactly that today, where they package up the combination of Silverlight and their app, and they don't use COM interop today, but because they don't have COM interop, they have to do something like that today. But yes, absolutely, you can do that.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Are you going to allow the group policy restrictions to respect the signed, the signatures, the app signatures you're going to put on?
So we haven't designed the app signing thing, but that was actually one of the design considerations that we thought about as we did that, was whether or not that we wanted signing to be able to be another knob on the group policy of like trust only signed apps.
Yeah.
Trust these apps or trust only apps that are signed.
Or only apps from this signature?
So only from this signature, so it's still being designed. In fact, it's in its genesis of design. So that's feedback that I can take back to the team to do the only install apps with this signature. So as of now, it doesn't exist, but I'll take that feedback back. Go ahead.
So let's say I have unmanaged code, C++ unmanaged code, and I want to call it from Silverlight as a trusted application with pinvoke. Can I do that?
Did you say, can you call pinvoke from Silverlight?
Yeah, so I want to tunnel through to my unmanaged C++ code. It's not a COM component. To just
Yeah, see, we don't support today. The question is, I think, is just can you call pinvoke effectively? Yeah. But we just support COM, so you need to expose that native capability. If you expose it via COM, then you can go ahead and tunnel through. Mm-hmm. But you can't do general pinvokes.
So I cannot make my assembly like security critical or something like that, and just.
No, you could, if it's actually an assembly, you can just export it or basically do the work to make it export as a COM thing, and then you can use it from Silverlight. But no, you can't, we limit it, and we don't allow you to do the general pinvoke thing. Okay, so go ahead.
Getting at COM interrupts, wonderful. Can we expect to get through to full trust.net in the future and then get IntelliSense and actually working against full trust.net assemblies?
So the question is, will we actually allow you to call full .NET assemblies? We did some work already to effectively enable sharing of .NET, what I'll say, the common BCL between Silverlight and .NET. So if you're using that common BCL, you can share those assemblies. But would we go so far as to allow you to start calling any .NET assembly and tunneling through?
Within the elevated context.
Yeah, the issue there is more about the differences between the assemblies between Silverlight and .NET. But if we had a model where the assemblies themselves, the way that they did COM interop was the same between the two, where it made sense to share those kinds of assemblies, maybe it's possible. What's likely is that if you had a full .NET assembly, you'd probably just port it over to work with Silverlight,
Yeah,
and
right.
that's probably the likely way that you would do something like that.
Thanks.
Sure. Go ahead.
When you right-click on your app and make the desktop icon,
Is there a way that we could provide a button in Silverlight that does that for them?
You want to provide a button that,
Well,
yes,
yeah.
yeah. So I didn't show it here, but there are two ways you can, I think if I understand your question correctly, there are two ways you can install a Silverlight app. You can either do it through a right-click menu, or you as a developer can provide your own branded experience on your app itself that says, click this button to install.
Perfect.
And the only thing we require in Silverlight is either it's the right click or it's user initiated. So we need the user to click somewhere, but we allow you to control what that somewhere looks like.
Okay, good.
Go ahead.
I had another question about the unmanaged stuff. Are we going to be able to install an application as an out-of-browser application without going through the browser first? Like we rolled a native installer, installed all my unmanaged components, register them in COM, and then it just doesn't work in the browser.
So there is work going on inside of Microsoft to enable that scenario, and including my team. We don't have an easy way to do that today. You have to kind of go through the browser, but we've had several people kind of ask the same thing. Can I do exactly what you guys are doing? And is it technically possible? Is there any magic we're doing? No, no magic at all. But we are updating some of our own config store to keep track of these apps. And so there is some bookkeeping that we're doing on our end to actually install these locally. So you could mimic that. We'd rather people didn't mimic it. Instead, we're trying to build a mechanism so that you could call into it that basically says, hey, install my app for me that doesn't require browser initiation. And that is active work that we're doing internally, but it just doesn't exist in Silverlight 4 today. Go ahead.
Since the trusted app already support COM interrupt, would it also support ActiveX in the future?
The question is, will it support ActiveX? You mean as in UI ActiveX?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not on our roadmap at this point in time. What we'd like is that the Silverlight itself is that Silverlight's got a fairly robust UI stack. It's got a fairly complete UI and graphics capabilities. We continue to add to it, but we hope in the future that anything you want from a graphics or UI perspective, you'll be able to do in Silverlight. Access to the underlying system, devices, we don't have control over that. We need to give you a way to tunnel through to those, but we hope that, so it's not a scenario of ours to support ActiveX. Instead, we think in the future we should have all the capabilities you need from a UI perspective. What we don't have is all the tunneling through to the underlying platform. So that's why we focus there.
Okay.
Is there no question here? Go ahead.
I guess kind of an extension to the one asked previously about running full trust .NET apps by connecting out of the Silverlight app. Right now we're launching in a pop-up window essentially an XBAP so that we can get full .NET support because we're accessing the full networking stack to access essentially a proxy server. What kind of opportunities can we see to just do that strictly in Silverlight? Where right now we don't have that full networking stack in there, we don't have access to the system at that level, or is using the XBAP still the best way to go?
So if the XBAP works for you today, then I'd say continue to go that path. If you're building a new app and you are looking at something like Silverlight, then maybe that's the option. If you have a reason to switch off of it today, then switching off to Silverlight may make sense if it does address your needs. Now, in terms of networking, today you're probably doing lower level TCP stuff, is that?
Yeah, like we're actually monitoring a TCP client, listening for clients to connect and creating streams, et cetera.
Yeah, so that low level functionality is not supported directly in Silverlight. I'm not sure if it's available via COM either, and I'm getting kicked out. But so there are certain things like that we hope to at some point in the future, especially with the elevated trust model, provide you lower level networking support. We don't have it today. If you have an app that satisfies that scenario today, I'd say continue to use that app and continue to give us the requirements for what you need to do with the low-level networking stack, and it'll be something that in the future we look to plumb through. We have actually heard that feedback from other sources as well. I'm going to go ahead and get outside so they can get everybody else in here. I'll take more questions out there. Sorry, they have another talk that needs to start.